Chapter 1. In the Shadow of the Nile. Birth of a civilization. You are standing on the edge of time, on the banks of a river older than history itself. Before you flows the Nile, wide and calm, the silent architect of a world soon to be born. The desert stretches endlessly to your left and right, dry and lifeless. But here, where the river breathes, life begins. The Nile does not roar, it whispers, it does not destroy, it gives. Each year, like the rising breath of a sleeping god, it floods the land with sacred water. It does not ask for worship, but receives it. You watch its waters swell, break their banks and retreat, leaving behind a rich black silt, more precious than gold. In this mud lies the seed of civilization. You see people settle along the river's edge. At first they are small tribes, herding cattle, catching fish, planting wild grains. They live by the rhythms of the river, waking with its flood, sleeping with its retreat. Over generations, these scattered villages grow into towns and then cities. Mud brick homes rise, walls take shape, markets buzz with voices and the smell of bread baking in clay ovens. You watch as language is born, not just in speech, but in signs carved into wood and bone. Symbols evolve, stories are passed down. The first gods are imagined in the wind and fire, the stars and the storm. A falcon soars overhead, and someone gives it a name that echoes forever, Horus. But it is not enough to survive. The people yearn for something more, order, meaning, power. You feel the tension grow between the lands of the north and the south. Tribes become kingdoms, kingdoms become rivals, and then war. You witness the moment that changes everything. A man named Narmer, fierce and visionary, marches north with the power of Upper Egypt behind him. He carries a white crown and the blessings of the gods. Battle follows. Blood darkens the Nile. And when the dust clears, he has conquered both lands. He places the red crown of Lower Egypt atop his own, uniting the two. You see the first pharaoh born, not a man, but a bridge between the divine and mortal. With unity comes vision. You walk through the first capital at Memphis, where stone temples rise alongside granaries and schools. Priests chant beneath towering columns. Scribes sit in rows, dipping reeds into ink, capturing laws, prayers, and harvests. The gods are no longer just whispers in the wind. They are sculpted in limestone, painted in ochre, called by name: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Thoth. Time itself is shaped by their beliefs. You learn their calendar divided into 3 seasons: Akhet, the flood parade, the growing Shemu, the harvest. Everything moves in cycles: birth, death, rebirth. The sun rises not just in the sky, but in the heart of their faith. Each dawn is a promise that Mahat, the balance of the world, still holds, but balance must be maintained. You feel the presence of Mahat everywhere, in law, in family, in architecture. Chaos, Isfet, lurks at the edges. It is the duty of all to keep it at bay. The king's power is not tyranny, but responsibility. He must preserve the world by living in truth, justice, and cosmic harmony. You travel down the Nile and watch as other cities rise: Abydos, Hierakonpolis, Thebes. You walk among artisans carving stone vessels, weavers creating linen from flax, farmers bending to the earth in worshipful labor. You hear songs sung to the sunrise. You see stories told in pottery and paint. You begin to understand that Egypt is more than a place. It is a world view, a sacred contract between land, river, sky, and man. In this land, even death is not an ending. It is preparation, a phase in a larger pattern. By the end of this chapter in time, you stand at the threshold of an era like no other. The river flows. Behind you, timeless, eternal. Before you lies the age of pyramids, gods, temples, and secrets carved in stone. Egypt is no longer just alive. It is awake, and you are here to witness it all. Chapter 2. Pharaohs. Flesh and divinity. You stand at the foot of a stone platform, and before you he rises, not as a man, but as a god walking among mortals. His skin gleams in the desert light. His crown towers, forged from conquest and cosmic truth. This is the pharaoh, not merely a king, but the very embodiment of Horus on earth. You bow your head not out of fear, but reverence. For in his breath, you believe, lies the balance of the universe. In Egypt, the pharaoh is more than ruler. He is divine authority, the living vessel of Ma'at. His heart is weighed not only after death, but every day in life. His words are law, not by decree, but by sacred alignment with the gods. You feel the eyes of a kingdom watch him, judge him, worship him. When he walks, cities move. When he dreams, monuments rise. You journey to the court of the old kingdom. You see the pharaoh. Joseph summoned Imhotep, his brilliant vizier and priest. Together they imagine something eternal, a tomb that touches the heavens. You witness the first pyramid take form at Saqqara. Layer upon layer, stone upon stone, it rises like a stairway to the stars. No longer just a grave, it becomes a statement. The king does not die. He ascends, and so begins an age of wonders. You drift through time and stand before the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. It dominates the horizon, 2.3 million stones, each placed with maddening precision. No iron, no wheel, no mortar, only will, labor, and faith. You walk its base and feel dwarfed not only by size but by ambition. This is no tomb. It is a ladder for the soul of a god. Yet not all pharaohs are distant. You follow one through the fields during harvest, dressed plainly, offering thanks to the Nile. Another leads warriors into battle, spear raised, cloak crimson against the sand. They are architects, generals, priests, judges. They bear the weight of a divine contract. And its price. You learn of the rituals. Each dawn, the pharaoh greets the sun god Ra, merging his spirit with the solar bark that sails the heavens. Each temple, every obelisk, is an extension of his body. His name is carved not for vanity, but so it will echo into eternity. To be forgotten is to die a second death. Inside the palace you walk among incense and chants. Courtiers whisper, priests record omens. Royal scribes etch deeds in stone. You learn the titles: Mighty Bull of Justice, Son of Ra, Lord of the Two Lands. Every epithet binds the king tighter to heaven, but power is never without peril. You feel the tension rise in dynasties where heirs plot, brothers betray, queens wield subtle force. One ruler builds temples, another builds armies. Some rule for months, others for decades, and always death waits, not as a threat, but a transformation. You follow the body of a pharaoh as it is washed, wrapped, anointed. The process of mummification begins, not to preserve flesh, but to preserve the self. His heart is left inside to be judged by Osiris. His name is spoken by priests to keep his soul alive. You see his tomb filled with goods, boats, statues, wine, food, spells. He goes not into darkness, but into eternity. Yet the pharaoh's presence does not end at burial. In every temple festival, in every citizen's prayer, his spirit is invoked. Statues of him are carried in golden boats. His deeds are sung beside the Nile. His face, once mortal, now gazes down as a god among gods, and you begin to see the paradox. He was a man, born, flawed, finite. But through ritual, through legacy, through the voice of his people, he becomes immortal. The pharaoh is not remembered because he ruled, but because he embodied a world that believed time itself could be conquered. You leave the court not with answers, but awe. You understand now, to rule Egypt was not to command, but to become. Pharaoh was the axis around which the cosmos turned, a soul anchored in earth, yet reaching for stars. Behind you, stone statues stand silent. Before you, the story continues. Chapter 3, Temples of Eternity. You step through the shadow of a stone pylon, and the air changes. Heat softens, echoes grow. Light bends around colonnades painted with stories older than memory. You are inside a temple, not just a building, but a bridge between worlds. Here gods walk among men, and time folds upon itself like parchment. The scent of incense is thick, mingling with dust and lotus oil. You hear the hush of priests reciting sacred texts, their voices steady, as if afraid to disturb the silence. Of the divine, the walls around you speak in color and stone, carvings of pharaohs offering gifts to gods, gods bestowing power in return. You read with your eyes, not your tongue. These are not mere decorations, these are spells, alive with intent. You walk through the temple of Karnak, and your feet find the sacred axis. Each step mirrors creation itself, from chaos to order, from dark to light. Massive columns rise like papyrus stalks, painted sky blue, capped with blooms that never wither. Above you, the roof represents the heavens. Beneath your feet, the floor is earth. You are the universe in miniature. You learn that the temple is not a place for the public. It is the domain of the gods and their chosen servants. Only priests may enter the innermost chambers. Only the pharaoh may approach the sanctuary. You stand outside the Holy of Holies, where the god statue rests in silence. No one sees it, yet its presence shapes the kingdom. In Thebes, you witness the Opet festival. A golden bark carrying the hidden god Amun glides down the Nile. Crowds cheer. Musicians play sistrums and harps. Priests in white robes chant ancient hymns. It is not spectacle, it is renewal. The god is reborn through ritual, and through him, the land is fertile once more. You understand now, religion is not belief here, it is function. A contract between gods and men, maintained through rites so precise they mirror the stars. You follow a high priest at dawn. He washes in sacred water, dons linen robes, and grinds natron with care. He approaches the sanctuary, barefoot. No words are spoken. The god's statue is unveiled, fed, clothed, and perfumed. Then it is veiled again. No crowds, no audience. Only duty, done every day without fail for centuries. If the ritual breaks, the world might fall apart. You explore other temples, Abydos, where Osiris lies buried, and Philae, dedicated to Isis. Each has its own rhythm, its own secrets. At Edfu, the story of Horus's battle with Seth unfolds across towering walls. At Dendera, the ceiling shows the entire zodiac, etched in constellations of turquoise and gold. You realize these are not just places of worship, they are libraries, observatories, time machines carved in limestone. You see how temples were centers of life. They housed schools, granaries, treasuries, even courts. Entire cities thrived in their shadows. Priests acted as scientists, doctors, astronomers. The line between sacred and practical blurred. Everything was part of a great cosmic order, Ma'at, and Ma'at must be maintained. You learn of temple construction, each stone laid with ceremony, each angle aligned to stars or solstices. Builders did not just raise walls, they recreated the cosmos. You marvel at how the temple of Abu Simbel was carved from living rock, its axis set so sunlight pierces its heart twice a year on the birthday and coronation day of Ramses II. You feel the sunbeams strike the god's face. The message is clear. This place is eternal, but even eternity faces enemies. You watch as foreign rulers arrive, Hyksos, Persians, Greeks, Romans. Some build, others loot. Some gods are merged with foreign ones. Amun becomes Zeus Ammon. Isis travels across the Mediterranean. Yet the temples endure. You walk among fallen columns, but the stories remain. Even in ruin they speak, and still the temple changes you. As you walk its halls, your steps slow, your breath deepens. You feel a silence that is not empty, but full. full of memory, intention, presence. You no longer see walls, you see portals. No longer priests, you see translators between worlds. You come to understand, in Egypt, temples were not made to honor the gods. They were made for the gods to dwell in. And in return, the gods upheld the world. You step back into the sun, eyes blinking. Behind you, the temple stands unmoved. It has witnessed millennia. It will witness more. And you carry a fragment of it now, deep inside you. The next time you look at stone, you will listen. The next time you see the stars, you will wonder, what sacred geometry lies between? And the story moves forward. Chapter 4, The Nile, Vein of Civilization. You stand at the riverbank before dawn. The air is still, thick with moisture. Mist coils above the dark waters like spirits not yet formed. Then the sun breaks over the horizon, and the Nile comes. Alive, it glitters like liquid gold, flowing northward, always northward, as if guided by the gods themselves. You realize this is not just a river. This is life. Without it, Egypt would be nothing but sand and stone. With it, Egypt becomes a miracle. Each year, the Nile floods like breath from a sleeping god. The waters rise slow and patient, spilling over the banks. You watch as brown earth disappears beneath a sea of silt-rich water. For days, fields vanish, villages adjust, life pauses, and then, as if cued by heaven, the waters retreat. What remains is black soil. Kemet, they called it, deep, fertile, sacred. You walk through the floodplains. Everywhere you see labor. Farmers with shaduffs raise water to nourish rows of wheat and barley. Children chase frogs through muddy fields. Oxen turn earth. Women gather reeds to weave baskets. The cycle is older than memory. The Nile floods, the land feeds, the people survive. Year after year, century after century. You understand now why. The Egyptians worshipped the Nile. It was more than a river, it was a god. Happy, the bringer of abundance, with skin the color of water and breasts heavy with nourishment. Offerings are made, hymns sung. In return, Happy blesses the land with predictability, with order, with Ma'at. You follow the river southward, against the current through Upper Egypt. The cliffs narrow, the land tightens. You pass by crocodiles, basking like statues, and herons gliding low. Papyrus sways at the edges. You arrive at Elephantine Island, where priests once measured the flood using a nilometer, a simple stone column but powerful. It could tell them everything, whether famine or feast awaited. Too little water and the crops wither. Too much, and they drown. Just enough, and the kingdom thrives. You see how the Nile does more than grow grain. It moves people, ideas, soldiers, and gods. It is a highway with no end. Boats glide silently along its current. Some are simple, wooden canoes, steered by poles. Others are royal barges, adorned with gold and lion heads, carrying pharaohs beneath silken canopies. You ride with merchants transporting incense, linen, copper, and wine. You float past temples, tombs, and bustling markets. Along the Nile, everything is connected, even time. You notice how life clings close to its edges. Beyond the green ribbon of land, the desert yawns open, red and silent. That desert is the Duat, the place of the dead. But the Nile, that is where the living dwell. Cities rise beside it. Memphis, Thebes, Abydos, each nourished by its breath. And when you die, your tomb faces west, toward the setting sun, the far shore. You live on the east bank. You are buried on the west. The Nile divides, but it also unites. You hear stories of how the first pharaoh, Narmer, journeyed along this river to unify Egypt. Upper and lower, lotus and papyrus. You imagine his fleet, sails billowing, standards raised, bringing order to a land split by geography but bound by the Nile's pulse. Even power flowed with the current. You come to understand the Nile as a clock too. Its rhythm shaped the calendar. Flood, plant, harvest. 3 seasons, not 4. They named them Akhet, Peret, and Shemu. The stars themselves bowed to this rhythm. When Sirius rose just before dawn, it was a sign. The flood was coming. The new year began. Everything began with the Nile. You step aboard a boat at sunset. The sky blazes orange, and the river turns to fire. The oars dip in silence. You hear the hum of life, frogs croaking, insects singing, the distant bark of a dog. You pass a fisherman casting nets and a scribe reading aloud under a fig tree. It is all simple, all eternal. As you close your eyes, you think of what you've seen. A river that never stops, that binds together empires, gods, seasons and souls. And you understand that the Nile is not just water, it is memory. When you next see a river, you will look differently. You will ask, who lived here? What rose and fell on these banks? What rituals were whispered? What songs sung to its current? You open your eyes and the Nile flows on, unchanged, unchanging. Chapter 5, The Art of Death, Mummification and the Journey to the Afterlife. You find yourself standing inside a silent chamber carved deep into limestone. The air is dry and heavy with incense. The flickering torchlight casts long shadows on the painted walls. Here, beneath layers of rock and time, the most sacred ritual of all begins. Not the celebration of life, but the preparation for death. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end. It was a doorway, a passage to another realm, and to pass. Through safely, you had to prepare. You had to be preserved, not just in memory, but in flesh. So begins the sacred process of mummification. You watch as the body is brought in. The deceased was once a nobleman, a priest of Amun. His skin is pale, his limbs still, but to the embalmers, he is not just a corpse. He is a soul on the threshold of eternity. First, the ritual words are spoken. The embalmers, masked and solemn, begin their work. You see them make the first incision on the left side of the abdomen. It's delicate, respectful. Through that cut, they reach in and remove the organs: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines. Each is carefully placed into canopic jars, guarded by the 4 sons of Horus. The heart, once believed to be the seat of the soul, is treated with care. Sometimes left inside, sometimes removed and ritually restored. But the brain, that is removed. Through the nose with a hook. To you it seems brutal, but to them it is practical. The brain, they believed, served no spiritual purpose. The body must be pure, empty of decay, before the long journey ahead. Next, they cleanse the cavity with palm wine and aromatic oils. Then comes the drying. They cover the body in natron, a salt mixture found in desert lakes. For 40 days, the body rests in this bed of white crystals, as the moisture is drawn out and the form preserved. When it is time, the body is washed. Again, this time with sacred water from the Nile. You assist in the process. You rub the skin with oils, frankincense, cedar, myrrh. The scent fills the room, earthy, sweet, divine. Then comes the wrapping. Layer upon layer of linen, each strip anointed, each fold marked with symbols. Amulets are tucked between the layers. The eye of Horus, the ankh, the scarab, each holds a prayer, each holds protection. The final linen binds the jaw, sealing the mouth in eternal rest. A priest, dressed as Anubis, kneels beside the body. He performs the opening of the mouth ceremony. With a ritual blade, he touches the lips, the eyes, the ears. This, he says, allows the soul to eat, speak, see and hear in the afterlife. You step back. The body is no longer a shell, it is a vessel, a bridge between 2 worlds. Now the journey truly begins. You walk beside the funeral procession. The mourners cry out, their faces veiled in linen. Professional wailers beat their chests. Musicians play flutes and drums. Priests chant prayers to Osiris and Ra. The mummy, inside a gilded coffin, is carried on a sled, dragged by oxen along the riverbank. Behind you, the tomb awaits. It is more than a grave. It is a cosmic machine, built to guide the soul through. The duet, the underworld. The walls inside are painted with spells, maps and stars. They tell of fire lakes, serpent guardians, and divine judges. You see the Book of the Dead unfurled along the corridor, its instructions precise, its warnings dire. You close your eyes and imagine the soul's path. First, the deceased must navigate the 12 gates of the night. Each hour, a new trial. A god stands watch. A name must be spoken, a truth must be told. Demons lurk, waiting to devour the unworthy. The heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If heavier, it is fed to Amit, the devourer. If balanced, the soul may pass. You feel the weight of that trial, the pressure of purity, of truth. In this world, lies can be hidden. In the afterlife, they are seen. But the priests believed in their magic. They believed that every spell, every charm, every sacred word would protect the deceased. They believed the soul could pass unharmed, reborn like the sun god Ra, who sails the sky by day and fights chaos by night. You follow the coffin into the tomb. The sarcophagus is placed in the burial chamber. The walls shimmer with gold and lapis lazuli. Food offerings are stacked high. Bread, beer, onions, meat, figs. Servant figurines, ushabti, stand in rows, ready to work in the afterlife. The final words are spoken. The tomb is sealed. Silence falls, but the journey is just beginning. You imagine the soul moving through the stars, standing before Osiris, whispering, "I have not lied. I have not stolen. I have not killed." And Osiris, green-skinned and eternal, nods in judgment. You step outside into the desert sun. Behind you, stone and shadow. Before you, the Nile gleams. The world continues, but you feel changed. You have seen what few dare to see. You have walked the path of the dead, and in that walk, you have found something unexpected, not fear, but hope. In ancient Egypt, death was not the enemy, it was the next chapter. And if the rituals were followed, if the life was lived in truth, then the soul could live forever. You turn your gaze to the horizon, where the sun begins to fall behind the western hills. That is where the dead now journey. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the sails of the solar boat gliding toward the stars. Chapter 6, Temples of Power. Where gods and kings converge, you arrive at dawn, as the desert air still clings to the coolness of night. Before you rises something enormous, an edifice of stone, symmetry, and spirit. The Temple of Karnak, or perhaps Luxor, depending on the age and dynasty. But all Egyptian temples bear the same heart. They are not merely places of worship, they are the engines of the cosmos. As you approach the first pylon, you feel the weight of its grandeur pressing down on your chest. Giant statues of pharaohs flank the entrance, still and imposing. Obelisks pierce the morning sky. These are not passive monuments, they are messages to the heavens, declarations of divine order. Every line carved into stone whispers, the gods live here, and so do kings. You walk through the gates and into the hypostyle hall. Forests of colossal columns rise around you. You tilt your head back, and it disappears into shadows. Light filters down through cracks in the ceiling, casting shafts of gold onto the painted walls. All around, hieroglyphs dance with color, stories of creation, of war, of pharaohs making offerings to Amun, to Ra, to Hathor. But this is not a museum, it is alive. You hear the low murmur of priests chanting. The smell of myrrh, sandalwood, and burning resin fills your lungs. You are not a tourist in this place. You are a participant, a soul allowed to step into the house of eternity. In ancient Egypt, temples were more than shrines. They were microcosms of the universe, built in harmony with the laws of Ma'at, order, balance, justice. Every wall, every courtyard, every sacred lake had a role to play in maintaining cosmic harmony. You follow the sacred way, the processional path that runs straight as a river of stone. It leads deeper into the heart of the temple, where only the purified may tread. Along the way, you pass sacred barks, altars for offerings, and chapels glowing with the dim light of oil lamps. Then you reach the sanctuary. It is dark, silent, smaller than you expected. In the very center sits the Naos, a sacred shrine holding the cult statue of the god. No eyes see this idol, but those of the high priest and the pharaoh. It is here, they believe, that the god dwells. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. The statue is dressed each morning, fed offerings, and sung to in daily ritual. The god, in return, grants protection, prosperity, and divine power to Egypt. You watch the ritual unfold. A priest enters barefoot, clean-shaven, cloaked in white linen. He bows, he lights incense, he sings sacred hymns from memory, words unchanged. For centuries, the statue is unveiled, washed, anointed with oils. Dressed in fresh linen and crowned in gold, the god is awakened. You realize something astonishing. This entire structure, all this stone and scale, exists for this one moment. A conversation between mortal and divine. The rituals are not for the crowd, not for spectacle, but for continuity. They keep the world turning. They ensure the sun will rise. They uphold the kingdom. Outside the temple is a hive of activity. Scribes copy scrolls in shaded alcoves. Bakers prepare bread offerings. Artists paint mythologies along column walls. Officials manage the temple estates, lands, livestock, vineyards. You learn that temples are not only spiritual centers, but economic ones too. They own farms, employ thousands, and influence politics. In many ways, they rival the royal palace. And at the center of it all, the pharaoh. He is more than a ruler. He is a bridge between worlds. The temple reminds you of this at every turn. On the walls, he is shown offering incense to the gods, smiting enemies with divine power, receiving the Ankh, the breath of life, from Ra himself. The art does not portray him as a man, but as a living god. Yet behind this majesty lies an even deeper truth. These temples are acts of devotion, not ego. The Egyptians did not build to boast, but to serve. Every brick was laid with ritual. Every name carved was a prayer. You feel it in the stones beneath your feet, the echo of a people who believed that the divine could be reached if only you built high enough, pure enough, enduring enough. As you exit through the same gates, sunlight now warming the ground, you look back once more. The temple remains still, unmoving, but inside, life continues, chanting, offering, recording, and somewhere deep in the sanctuary, the god sits, waiting for the next morning's hymn. You understand now, to enter a temple in ancient Egypt is to step outside time. It is to walk in a place where gods dwell, where kings become eternal, and where stone itself carries the breath of faith. And as you leave its sacred grounds, something lingers with you, a silence, a reverence, a whisper that in this desert of sand and sky, humanity once built not for themselves, but for the gods they believed would never die. Chapter 7. The Nile. Lifeblood of civilization, you stand on the riverbank just as the first light of day breaks across the horizon. Before you flows a ribbon of life, a current so old, so vast, it has watched pharaohs rise and fall, temples crumble, and cities vanish into sand. This is the Nile, and without it, there would be no Egypt. The water is calm now, its surface gleaming like polished obsidian under the rising sun. But this serenity hides the power it holds. The Nile is not just a river, it is the very heartbeat of a civilization. You kneel and touch the water. It is cool, smooth, and ancient. You are touching the same current that carried the boats of Ramses, that fed the crops of Thebes, that shaped the myths of gods and kings. You look out and see boats drifting by. Reed, skiffs and merchant vessels, their sails swelling in the morning breeze. The river is not merely a feature of the land, it defines the land. It carves through desert and stone, bringing life where there would otherwise be none. Egypt is not a land of endless sand. It is a narrow, fertile strip, a green thread hemmed by death on either side. And this thread owes everything to the Nile. Every year, like clockwork, the river rises. Its floodwaters pour over the banks, soaking the black soil. Kemet, the land of rich earth. Farmers rejoice. Children dance barefoot in the mud. The flood is not feared, it is celebrated. For it is not destruction, it is rebirth. The water brings silt, minerals and moisture, transforming arid land into lush fields. Wheat, barley, flax, these grow because of this divine rhythm. You walk along the edge of a newly flooded field. The farmers are already out, using wooden tools and cattle to plow the wet earth. The sun is rising higher now, casting gold across the land. You hear laughter, chants, instructions bark to oxen. It is a symphony of survival, conducted by the river. But the Nile is not only nature, it is divine. The Egyptians believed it was the tears of Isis, mourning for her husband Osiris. It was also linked to Hapi, the god of inundation, a round-bellied, generous deity who ensured abundance. To the people, the flood was not just a cycle, it was a blessing, a sign that the gods still smiled upon Egypt. You stop at a small shrine dedicated to Hapi. Offerings lie at its base, lotus flowers, bread, a tiny clay figurine. Someone was here recently praying for a good harvest. The connection between people and river is not just practical, but spiritual. Every element of Egyptian life, food, trade, faith, flows from the Nile. You travel south now, against the current. You pass villages and fields, temples and tombs. Along the banks, you see life unfolding. Fishermen casting nets, women washing linens, scribes counting grain, children splashing in the shallows. Time seems slower here, measured not in hours, but in floods and harvests. You stop in a bustling town. In the marketplace, goods from all corners of Egypt are exchanged. Alabaster from the hills, gold from Nubia, papyrus scrolls, linen, spices. Traders arrive on boats, their sails flapping. The Nile is Egypt's highway, connecting north and south, Memphis and Thebes, the Delta, and the Valley of Kings. It carries more than goods. It carries stories, knowledge, ambition. In a shaded corner of the town, you meet an old man, a storyteller. He beckons you close and begins to speak of how the gods first gave the Nile to men, how its flow follows a sacred order. He talks of crocodiles as sacred beasts, of how Pharaoh once made sacrifices during the low floods to appease the gods. His voice is slow and steady, like the river itself. As the sun begins to set, you find yourself back on the riverbank. The light is red now, casting long shadows across the reeds. The current continues to flow, unbothered by your presence, unaware of empires lost or won. It has been doing this long before you were born, and it will continue long after you are gone. And now you understand. Egypt is not built on gold or stone or even blood. It is built on water, on the slow, steady generosity of a river that never forgot to return. The Nile is more than a force of nature. It is the silent architect of a civilization, the invisible spine that holds together the body of history. As night falls and the stars appear, those same stars the ancient priests once used to predict the flood, you feel a strange comfort. You have met the Nile not as a tourist or observer, but as a soul seeking to understand the ancient heart of a nation, and the river, patient as always, has answered. Chapter 8, Writing for Eternity. The world of hieroglyphs and scribes. You find yourself standing in a cool, shaded hall of stone. Sunlight spills in through high slits in the temple walls, falling like golden ribbons onto the smooth floor. Before you, carved deeply into the sandstone, are symbols that feel alive. Birds mid-flight, eyes staring back at you, reeds, serpents, and royal crowns. This is no ordinary writing. You are in the presence of hieroglyphs, the sacred script of Egypt, the language of gods and kings. Each symbol seems to pulse with meaning. You step closer, a vulture with wings outstretched, a seated man, a coiled rope. To a foreign eye, it may look like decoration, but you now know better. These signs are not mere art, they are immortal words, etched in stone so they can never be forgotten. A scribe approaches, his linen kilt crisp, his reed brush tucked behind his ear. He eyes you with curiosity, then nods. He knows you're here to learn. He invites you to follow. You walk with him through the temple complex, into the scriptorium, a quiet, reverent space where knowledge is born and preserved. Here, scrolls of papyrus line the walls. Some are fresh, others centuries old. The air smells of ink and reeds, dust and time. The scribe gently rolls open a scroll. You see the flowing lines of hieratic script, faster, more fluid than the formal. Hieroglyphs used for everyday records and letters. This, he explains, is the handwriting of bureaucracy, of tax collectors and grain counters, of temple accountants and royal archivists. You ask how he learned to write like this. He smiles. It is a long and difficult journey. Years of training, memorizing hundreds of signs, practicing for hours by candlelight, copying proverbs, reciting histories. Only the best students become true scribes. It is a respected life, a privileged one. Unlike farmers, artisans, or soldiers, scribes are not called to labor or war. They labor for eternity, recording the will of gods and men. He leads you to a stone slab where young boys are bent over wooden pallets, grinding red and black pigments from minerals. You watch them carefully dip their reed pens and practice, copying the names of kings. One boy winces as his instructor raps his knuckles for a crooked sign. There is no room for error in this sacred craft. Then the scribe shows you something rare, a royal decree inscribed in gold leaf on papyrus, sealed with the symbol of the pharaoh. This is law, religion, and power made visible. You realize now that Egypt's strength doesn't lie only in its armies or its monuments. It lies in its memory, written in script that has survived millennia. Later, he takes you to the outer wall of the temple. Together, you read a column of hieroglyphs carved in deep relief. They tell the story of a pharaoh's victory over Nubian rebels, but more than that, they immortalize him. For in Egypt, to speak a name, to write it, to remember it, is to keep someone alive. To erase a name is to destroy their soul. This is why tombs are filled with texts, why statues bear inscriptions, why walls speak. The Egyptians wrote for eternity. As the sun shifts, casting long shadows, the scribe brings you into a tomb, not royal, but of a nobleman, a high priest. The walls are filled with Book of the Dead passages, spells and prayers meant to guide the soul through the afterlife. The writing is precise, the illustrations vibrant even after thousands of years. You feel as if you're walking through a manual for the next world. You pause at one spell, reading it aloud softly. The scribe tells you that these texts weren't just for royalty. Wealthy individuals commissioned their own versions, personalizing the path to the afterlife. In a world where life was fleeting, writing was a weapon against oblivion. Before you leave, the scribe hands you a small piece of papyrus. On it, he has written your name in hieroglyphs. You study it, recognizing the bird, the reed, the water ripple. It is beautiful, but more than that, it is real. Now, in the language of eternity, you exist. You step outside into the brightness once more. The Nile flows in the distance, unchanged. But you are changed. You understand now that Egypt was not only a land of pyramids and pharaohs, it was a land of words, where scribes held power equal to generals, where stories were weapons, where names lived beyond death. And as long as even one of these symbols remains, carved into a hidden tomb wall or preserved in a museum halfway across the world, Egypt still speaks. Chapter 9, Temples of Power, the sacred architecture of Egypt. The sun is just beginning to rise as you step off the boat onto the quiet riverbank. Before you, the stone silhouette of a colossal temple stretches toward the orange sky. Massive pylons towering above the palms mark the entrance to a world where mortals meet gods. You are about to enter the Temple of Karnak, but it might as well be any great temple of Egypt, for they all share one purpose: to house divine power. You walk along the avenue of sphinxes, guardians of the sacred path. Each step brings you closer to the threshold between the human and the divine. As you approach, the pylons loom like mountains. Their surfaces are alive with scenes of pharaohs smiting enemies, offering incense, receiving blessings from gods whose names echo through eternity. These walls are not just decoration, they are statements of power, and you are meant to be in awe. You step through the gateway and suddenly the world darkens. Inside the first courtyard, light filters in at sharp angles, catching dust in the air like glitter. Stone columns so tall they seem to defy gravity form a forest. You crane your neck, your breath stolen by their sheer scale. The tops are shaped like papyrus blossoms. You realize now, this temple is a vision of the world itself. The columns are the marshes of the Nile's creation. The ceiling is the sky, and you are walking through a sacred map of existence. Your guide, a temple priest wrapped in white linen, explains that you have entered the domain of Amun-Ra, the king of the gods. But this is no public place. Few may come this far. The deeper into the temple you go, the more exclusive it becomes. Only the pure, only the initiated may cross certain thresholds. You are allowed because today you are not just an observer, you are a witness to the sacred. He leads you past a courtyard where offerings are made: bread, wine, incense, flowers. A scent of myrrh hangs in the air. You hear chanting, a deep melodic sound that seems to come from the walls themselves. You goes through the hypostyle hall, its roof supported by 100 towering columns. In this filtered light, time seems to blur. You are walking where pharaohs walked, where priests whispered spells in the dark, and then the innermost chamber, the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. You enter in silence. Here, hidden in the deepest part of the temple, stands a shrine, a gilded box that once held the sacred image of the god. The priest tells you that only the high priest or pharaoh could open this during rituals. Inside, the god would be clothed, fed, and honored each day, not as a metaphor, but as a real, living presence. This was the god's home. Temples were not churches. They were cosmic engines where harmony between heaven and earth was maintained. You sit for a moment on a cool stone bench. The air is still. You imagine the ceremonies once performed here. Drums, incense, golden boats carried on shoulders, the god's statue revealed to a gasping crowd. It wasn't spectacle, it was sacred. The pharaoh standing before the god was not just a king. He was the bridge between humanity and divinity. This architecture was built not just to impress, but to connect worlds. Your guide gestures for you to rise. He leads you up a hidden stairway through narrow corridors and finally out to the roof. From here, you see the entire temple complex, a maze of halls, courts, and sacred lakes. Beyond it, the Nile shimmers, and across the river, the tombs of the dead stare back in silence. You begin to understand life, death, and the divine were not separate in Egypt. They were part of a single flowing order. As the sun climbs higher, its light floods the temple. The reliefs on the walls come alive, Horus soaring above, Isis spreading her wings, pharaohs offering Maat, the cosmic truth. The temple isn't just built to house the gods, it is built to remind you of your place. In the universe, it speaks to eternity in every block of stone. You descend again, walking slower now, absorbing every symbol. You pass storerooms once filled with offerings, libraries of scrolls, and secret niches where priests hid sacred amulets. Every wall whispers a story. Every carving is a prayer. Nothing in this place is accidental. Outside once more, the heat strikes you. You blink at the sudden light and turn to look back. The temple behind you gleams in the sun, colossal and unmoved by time. You realize that these were not just buildings, they were monuments of faith, expressions of cosmic order, declarations of divine presence. Even now, thousands of years later, the temples of Egypt still command reverence. And as you walk away, the silence feels heavier, not because it is empty, but because it is full of gods, of kings, of rituals that once held the world together. And now, you carry part of that world within you. Chapter 10, Tombs of the Nobles, Lives Remembered Beyond the Pharaohs. You leave behind the grandeur of temples and pyramids, venturing across the Nile into the rocky cliffs of the West. Here, the land is harsher, quieter, yet deeply sacred. This is the necropolis of Thebes, where not only pharaohs but nobles, high priests, scribes and artisans were laid to rest. You follow a dusty path toward the tombs of the forgotten elite, those who ruled not kingdoms but departments, not armies but ideas. Unlike the pyramids that shout their power into the sky, these tombs whisper. They are carved into the limestone, cliffs hidden from plain sight. But as you descend into one, torchlight flickering on the walls, you realize these are not humble graves. They are vivid biographies in stone. You find yourself inside the tomb of Rekhmir, a vizier under Thutmose III. On the walls, scenes stretch out like scrolls, carefully painted, lovingly preserved. There is no gold, no towering sarcophagus. Yet here, you see an entire life unfold. Rekhmir judging disputes, supervising workers, offering to the gods. He greets foreign ambassadors, receives tribute from Nubia and the Levant. You aren't just looking at images. You are stepping into a man's memory. You run your fingers over the carved inscriptions. Hieroglyphs speak not of divine lineage, but of hard work, devotion, and piety. Rekhmir asks the gods for justice in the afterlife, not power. He prays for his name to be spoken, for his deeds to be remembered. You understand now, for the Egyptians, memory was immortality. Your guide leads you into another tomb, this one belonging to Sennacherib, a worker from Deir el-Medina. He was no noble, no high official. He was an artisan who helped carve the tombs of kings, and yet his own resting place is breathtaking. Painted walls bloom with colors even after millennia. You see him and his wife side by side, harvesting crops in the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. They sail on sacred boats, kneel before Osiris, walk beneath the stars. You feel a warmth in this tomb that you did not expect. It's not the heat of the desert, it's something more human. Here, death is not feared, it is embraced, prepared for, beautified. You are witnessing love, carved into eternity. Climbing higher up the cliffside, you enter the tomb of Ramses, another vizier, his tomb half finished, half stone, half painted. On one wall, a delicate funerary procession begins. On another, raw, chisel-marked stone shows the work frozen in time. You feel the pressure of legacy here. Ramses had begun preparing his tomb during life, but it remained incomplete. Death came before perfection, and still he is remembered. Each of these tombs shares a theme, that life is sacred, that even small deeds matter. and that every soul deserves a place in the afterlife. The walls show families dining together, musicians playing flutes, workers harvesting figs, and scribes writing under the shade of trees. These are not scenes of conquest or empire. They are scenes of joy, of quiet pride, of eternal routine. You learn that the tombs were more than memorials. They were machines of remembrance. Through ritual, prayer, and offering, the deceased remained active in the world of the living. The opening of the mouth ceremony gave the mummy the ability to breathe and speak again. The offering formula, repeated on tomb walls, asked the gods for bread, beer, cattle, and linen, not for the body, but for the spirit forever. And then you come upon a small shaft leading deeper into the rock. Inside, nothing grand, just a simple sarcophagus sealed for thousands of years. You feel the air cool around you. The presence of death is real, but not terrifying. Here, death is not an end. It is a passage. Above you, sunlight breaks over the ridge. You climb back to the surface and look out over the Theban hills. Across the river, you see the temple of Hatshepsut glowing against the cliffs and the tips of temple pylons rising like beacons. Around you, hundreds of tombs dot the landscape, each one a story, a soul, a name remembered. And as you walk among them, you realize something profound. The greatness of Egypt was not built only by pharaohs. It was shaped by countless lives, by artisans and advisors, scribes and singers, lovers and dreamers, each one leaving a mark on stone, each one reaching toward the eternal. In this silence, their voices still echo, and now, as you remember them, they live again. Chapter 11, Death and the Afterlife. Trials of the soul in the Hall of Judgment. You stand before a towering wall, its stone surface etched with ancient hieroglyphs. As your eyes adjust to the torchlight, the story unfolds. Not one of war, nor of gods in triumph, but of death and what comes after. In ancient Egypt, dying wasn't an end. It was only the beginning of a far more important journey, the passage of the soul through the du'at, the underworld. You close your eyes, and suddenly you're no longer standing in a temple. You're in darkness, surrounded by stars, stepping onto a narrow boat as it drifts along a black river. You are the soul, the car, beginning the perilous voyage toward eternal judgment. All around you, strange beings watch. Crocodile-headed demons, serpents with human voices, flaming lakes and monstrous gates. But fear doesn't rule here. You were prepared. Every Egyptian, rich or poor, noble or peasant, learned these rites from the Book of the Dead. Not a single book, but a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions. You've memorized the sacred words, recited the names of the gatekeepers, and placed protective amulets upon your chest. You hold the power of speech, of memory, of identity, because without it, you would vanish into chaos. The boat glides onward. You pass through 12 regions, one for each hour of the night. With every gate, you speak the right spell, make the correct gesture, and offer the name of the guardian. Failure would mean being torn apart by demons, your soul devoured. But success brings light, and eventually, the boat reaches a great hall, the Hall of Two Truths. You step onto solid ground. Before you stands a divine assembly. At its center, the mighty Osiris, ruler of the underworld, sits upon his throne. Green-skinned, crowned with feathers, holding the crook and flail. His gaze pierces beyond time. To his left and right are 42 gods, each one representing a law, a principle, a truth. You must now proclaim your innocence in the negative confession. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not spoken lies. I have not defiled the sacred waters. One by one, you declare that your soul bears no stain, and then comes the trial. In the center of the hall stands a great scale. On one side is your heart, still, red, alive with memory. On the other, a single white feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic balance. If your heart weighs heavier than the feather, if it is burdened by sin, you are doomed. The monstrous Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, waits beside the scale. If you fail, she will devour your soul. Not punishment, obliteration. You will cease to exist, your name lost forever. But if your heart is light, you are judged true of voice. Osiris nods, the gods smile. You are granted passage into Aru, the field of reeds, the eternal paradise. You see it now, blooming like a dream. Vast green fields stretch beneath a golden sky. Rivers flow calmly, lotus. Flowers bloom in still ponds. You find your loved ones long past. You plow your field, harvest your crop, sail your boat. You are young again, free from pain, never aging, never hungry. You live among the blessed in joy and peace for eternity. This is not heaven as others might know it. It is life perfected, a mirror of Egypt itself, but without hardship, injustice, or death. Here you are exactly who you were meant to be, remembered, honored, whole. You begin to understand the Egyptians not as obsessed with death, but with continuity. They preserved bodies because they believed the body was the anchor for the soul. They buried books, food, and statues because they saw the afterlife as real as the Nile. They built elaborate tombs, not as monuments to ego, but as launch pads into forever. And most importantly, they saw morality as the key to survival beyond the grave. You could not bribe your way into paradise. Even pharaohs were judged. Even kings had to answer to Ma'at. You open your eyes. The hieroglyphs on the wall come back into focus. A figure stands beside the scale, arms raised. The heart floats above. The pan, the feather gleams. Osiris watches. This isn't just a story. It's a worldview that lasted over 3,000 years. A vision of eternity built on truth, justice, and memory. You step back from the wall, the image of the scale still burning in your mind. Your journey through Egypt has taught you the wonders of stone and sun, of temples and dynasties. But here, in this quiet chamber of judgment, you have glimpsed what the Egyptians truly valued. A good life, a just life, a name that endures. And as you speak that name aloud, even now, they live. Chapter 12, Lost and Found. How the world rediscovered ancient Egypt. You walk along a quiet desert, dust swirling at your feet, the sun hanging low in the western sky. Before you lies a buried colossus, its head barely visible, its body hidden. Beneath sand, you reach out, your hand brushing against ancient stone. The wind howls softly, carrying whispers of a lost civilization. For centuries, Egypt had slept beneath layers of dust, time, and forgetting. The temples stood in silence, the hieroglyphs unreadable, the names of pharaohs forgotten. You feel that silence now. A silence that lasted nearly 2,000 years. The last priest of Egypt closed the doors of the final temple in the late 4th century AD. By then, Rome had become Christian. The old gods, Ra, Isis, Osiris, were outlawed. Temples were abandoned, statues were toppled. Even the writing, the elegant sacred hieroglyphs vanished. Egypt had become a land of ruins. You fast forward through time. Arab scholars marveled at the monuments, calling the pyramids pharaohs' granaries. Travelers from the Middle Ages made wild guesses. Some believed giants had built them. The true stories lay locked in stone, inaccessible to anyone who couldn't read the ancient signs. And no one could, until you arrive in the 18th and 19th centuries, an age of curiosity, conquest, and rediscovery. The world turns its eyes to Egypt once again. You sail with Napoleon's army as it arrives in 1798, not just with soldiers, but with scholars, artists, and engineers. They marvel at the temples of Luxor and Karnak, sketching every detail. For the first time, Europe begins to see Egypt not as a land of superstition, but of science and wonder. But nothing compares to what happens in 1799. Near the town of Rosetta, A soldier uncovers a slab of black basalt, the Rosetta Stone. You kneel beside it. 3 scripts are carved upon its surface: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs. It is a message repeated 3 times, a bridge between worlds. You now follow a young French scholar, Jean-François Champollion. His mind is fierce, his passion unrelenting. For years he studies the Rosetta Stone, comparing every symbol with Greek equivalents, searching for patterns. He learns Coptic, the language descended from ancient Egyptian. Piece by piece, he breaks the code. In 1822, he stands before the French Academy and utters a single phrase: "I hold the key." And with that, the voices of the pharaohs return. Hieroglyphs can be read again. The names of Ramses, Thutmose, and Akhenaten are spoken aloud after 2,000 years of silence. You walk with early archaeologists, many well-meaning, others greedy. Temples are dug up, artifacts taken, mummies unwrapped in candlelit drawing rooms in London and Paris. Egyptomania sweeps the world. Obelisks are raised in Rome, Paris, London, and New York. Cleopatra inspires plays, paintings, and fashion. Pharaohs become legends. You witness one of the greatest moments of discovery. It is 1922. British archaeologist Howard Carter kneels before a sealed doorway deep inside the Valley of the Kings. "Can you see anything?" a voice asks from behind. Carter replies, "Yes, wonderful things." You peer over his shoulder as a golden glint catches your eye. It is the tomb of Tutankhamun, untouched for 3,000 years. Inside are treasures that defy imagination. Chariots, statues, jewelry, games, food, all placed there to guide a boy king into the afterlife. And in the innermost chamber, the iconic golden death mask of Tutankhamun lies waiting, his serene face now known around the world. But Egypt is no longer a silent witness to others' curiosity. You walk through modern Cairo, through the halls of the new Grand Egyptian Museum. Here, Egyptians lead the research, protect the artifacts, and tell their own story. The treasures are no longer trophies. They are heritage, living memory. You reflect on the arc of this journey, from the rise of a mighty civilization to its long slumber, and then to its awakening in modern times. What was once buried has been brought back into the light, not just in museums and textbooks, but in the imagination of millions. You step into the present, but you carry the past with you. You hear the echo of chants in a temple long vanished. You see the glint of gold beneath desert sand. You speak the name of a pharaoh, and in doing so, give them life once more. Egypt was never truly lost. It was waiting for you to remember. Epilogue. Echoes beyond time. You stand on the edge of the Nile at dusk. The sky burns orange. The river flows quietly, just as it did thousands of years ago when the gods were believed to walk beside mortals. The great pyramids are silhouettes. On the horizon, timeless and still, and yet something within you has changed. You've journeyed through creation myths and dynastic glory. You've felt the sun rise with Ra, mourned with Isis, and passed judgment in the Hall of Maat. You've stood beneath obelisks and looked into the hollow eyes of mummies. You've witnessed the fall of empires, the silence of centuries, and the spark of rediscovery. And now, as the wind carries the scent of sand and history, you understand. Ancient Egypt was never just a place. It was, and remains, a story. A mirror held up to our own longings for permanence, for meaning, for something greater than ourselves. Every god carved in stone, every tomb sealed with care, every hieroglyph etched with reverence was a message sent across time. We were here, we mattered, and we remembered. In learning their stories, you've become part of them. You've walked through their temples, crossed into their underworld, and risen with their sun. You've heard their voices again, not in crumbling ruins, but in your own imagination. History does not sleep. It waits, and now you carry it forward. The gods are watching, and you remember.